Hello, today's topic is going to be body composition. So I'm going to get my PowerPoint pulled up here and we'll get started. Kind of a shorter lecture today, I think. Get slideshow going here. A shorter section today here, then we will move into a section related to weight management. So we'll talk about weight loss, obesity, those types of issues, and weight gain as well, which is an important component for some athletes. Again, not as prevalent in regards to its importance in comparison to weight loss, which is affecting a lot of people in our country. That'll kind of end our weight unit, I guess. So again, in this unit, our goal is to kind of focus on the basics of body composition. So what is body composition? What are we talking about when we say body fat percentage, body composition, those types of things? So body composition is our ratio of fat mass to fat-free mass. Let me get my little pointer out here. So we're looking at how much fat do you have in comparison to something known as fat-free mass. So fat-free mass, which is listed here, includes like your bone, muscle, connective tissue, and organs. Okay, so it's kind of that essential components within the body above and beyond, what you might have as fat. Fat mass can be broken down into two categories. We have essential fat and non-essential fat. Okay. Again, when we think about essential fat as it relates to body composition, don't be confused with nutritional essential fats. Okay. So again, when we talked about in our protein unit, for example, essential amino acids are amino acids that you need to consume every single day. When we're talking about essential fat as it relates to body composition, we're talking about what you have or what you need to have in order to maintain physiological function. So yes, is it related to nutrition? Yes, absolutely. But when we're thinking about the definition of essential fat, it's basically the amount of fat that I need to have within my body in order to maintain basic physiological functioning. Okay. So again, this can vary depending on our genders. So for males, the essential fat components, need to be 3%, and for females, those essential fat components need to be 12%. Okay. So again, essential fat is basically the fat that we need in order to maintain physiological functioning stored within our body. And for males, we need 3%. For females, we need to have 12%. Again, what's the reason for this difference in, fat composition when we compare males versus females? It's certainly the process of reproduction is responsible for that. So again, females are going to need more essential fat because there might be a time in your life where you're going to go into labor and you need to do this strenuous thing for many, many hours. It could be 24 hours or maybe more than that. So females need to have more essential fat to make their reproductive systems viable, essentially. Okay. Non-essential fat is any fat above and beyond those essential levels. So non-essential fat, if I'm a male and I have a body fat percentage of 10, for example, then I have 3% essential and 7% non-essential. So again, that non-essential just basically means like I don't necessarily need that in order to survive and maintain regular functioning. Same thing for women, if you had body fat percentage of 25, 12 of that is essential and 13 of that is non-essential, meaning that 13% we could live without any issues if we didn't have that, essentially. Okay. Let's see, when we look at BMI is known as body mass index, and body mass index tells us simply the relationship between how much weight you have and your height. Okay, so it's simply a ratio of how much you weigh versus how tall you are. So does it specifically tell us anything about body composition and how much essential versus non-essential fat you have? No, but it gives us a kind of a good estimate in regards to your current weight status, and we'll talk more about BMI here coming up. So again, as I mentioned, we think about essential fat. Again, males need 3%, females need 12%. What are we using this for? Again, I kept it pretty vague in the previous slide, just saying that it's needed for physiological function of organs, but also important for a variety of other reasons. So long-term energy, again, we need to have something stored if we were to put ourselves in some sort of starvation situation, then we need to have enough fat stored in order to, maintain ourselves. Nerve conduction. So again, within the nervous system, we have something known as like myelin sheaths, and myelin sheaths are basically like fat segments that are surrounding the neurons, which are the cells that are transmitting signals. And so if I don't have the fat surrounding those nerves, it slows things down substantially. So I wouldn't be able to respond very quickly or conduct that signal very fast, basically, is the most basic way I could put that. Also insulation. So again, we need some fat, under our skin surface to provide us with some insulation. And then also protection of vital organs. Again, think about, if I didn't have any fat within my, thoracic cavity, those organs would be bouncing around and causing friction against each other. So fat can provide some protection for us as well. Where is this essential fat stored? Stored in bone marrow, heart, liver, lungs. Excuse me. Oh, nervous tissue, intestines, cell membrane, and the brain. So again, lots of places within the body we will find some of this essential fat. Again, we said that non-essential fat was anything above and beyond those levels. So this can increase our risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, and just overall health and mortality is directly proportionate to the amount of non-essential fat that I have. Okay, so again, the more fat that I have, the greater risk associated with cardiovascular disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, etc. Okay. Where is non-essential fat stored? Probably like 3 major locations. The first one I'll start with is intramuscular. So this means within the muscles. So again, I know this is like a weird way to compare this, but I want you to think about like if you were to eat a chicken breast versus a chicken leg. Again, a chicken leg, in my opinion, or the chicken thigh, for example, tastes a lot better than like the chicken breast. We also know that it's not as healthy, and the reason for that is because there's more fat stored within that thigh, within that leg. That's one of the reasons why it's considered dark meat versus white meat. The white meat or that chicken breast is going to be pretty lean in nature. Again, not a lot of fat stored intramuscularly for a chicken, whereas we see more of that fat stored in like their legs and thighs. Again, so you can see some fat storage within the muscles themselves. So that's actually not a bad place to store fat, particularly if I'm an endurance athlete and I'm interested in doing something for a long duration. It's kind of nice to have that fat available, right there within the muscle. That's going to help with efficiency. So that's one option. Another option is subcutaneous fat, and this is basically just the fat that's stored underneath your skin surface. Again, this can range significantly from person to person, and we'll talk about how we could actually measure that coming up in this unit. And then probably the worst place for us to store this non-essential fat is around our organs, or what we would call visceral fat. And visceral fat, again, the fat located around or surrounding our organs, is probably the most dangerous of the fats, followed by subcutaneous fat being kind of second related to that. The reason that visceral fat is worse than subcutaneous fat is it can directly impact like insulin sensitivity and some other factors related to just general physiological functioning within those vital organs. So again, we don't want to have a lot of fat viscerally or surrounding the organs. So what are some ways in which we can measure body composition and kind of see where we're at and what's going on with that? I kind of selected a few that I thought were the most common ways to measure body composition. This is certainly not an all-inclusive list, but we can kind of compare and contrast how each of these methods might be used to measure body composition. Again, we already mentioned, and I've got more coming up on BMI. And again, BMI is simply body mass index, or the comparison of how much you weigh in relation to how tall you are. Okay. Again, not super accurate in comparison to maybe the next two that I'm going to talk about, but it gives us a good estimate. It's non-invasive. All I have to do is ask somebody or weigh them and measure them to determine, you know, what their BMI is. So it's pretty non-invasive compared to some of the other measurements. Let's take a look at skin fold. That's shown in this picture over here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a caliper, which you can see in this picture. This doesn't hurt. I know it looks like it's like a needle, but it's not. It's just like two little pincher things basically that come together and pinch the skin. So it's not painful or anything else like that. And basically what we're doing when we take skin fold measurements is we are looking at how much fat is stored directly under the skin surface. So it gives us information about that subcutaneous fat that we talked about as one of the components of non-essential fat. So when I do skin fold measurements, a couple things to note with this. There are 9 different sites here. We're looking at this gentleman's tricep. So again, we're measuring how much fat is stored in the tricep. But of those 9 sites, they're kind of all over the body. So there's one that's chest, bicep, 2 that are found in the stomach, 1 on the thigh, 1 on your calf, and then there's 1 on your back as well. So again, they're kind of all over the body, so it gives us a good idea of, you know, if I take all 9 of those, it's going to be more accurate than if I just got like 1 or 3. But there are, different equations that we can use in order to determine what your body fat percentage is based on how many measurements you have. So again, more is better in terms of accuracy for the body composition. However, one thing to note is it is fairly invasive. Again, I have to actually touch you as a practitioner and touch your stomach in order to get those measurements. And there's one that's like on your back, so you would need to take off your shirt. For ladies, then you need to have a sports bra on, or I need to, you know, lift up your shirt and get underneath there. So it's a little uncomfortable for people, so that's kind of one con with it. The other con with it is the person that's actually measuring that body composition needs to be well trained. So there is definitely some skill associated with doing this correctly and accurately. So the research shows that you need to have 1,000 repetitions of practice with the skin fold calipers before you become an expert in this area. So again, you know, we've got to have a lot of practice with this in order for us to kind of perfect our skills. I can tell you otherwise related to my personal, you know, experience as a personal trainer and things like that, that if someone is very big, so if they have a lot of fat stored subcutaneously, it's really difficult to get an accurate measurement for them, particularly like if they had a lot of excess weight in their stomach area. It's really hard to get an accurate skin fold measurement for them. If you're working with athletes or people that are relatively fit, this is a great way. This is easy to do if you have the skill, and it is very accurate. But like I said, you know, if you're working with people that are pretty overweight, it's not going to be as accurate because it's going to be more difficult for you to get a true skin fold measurement for particular people. So that's the deal with the skin folds. Again, super cheap. This caliper isn't very expensive. It's less than $200 to get a good caliper. You can get, you know, a cheap one for like $30. It's portable, so I could take it with me to, if I was a personal trainer and I was doing in-home training, I could take it to their house. It's easy to store. Maybe I have a personal training studio or an office or something like that. Easy to keep it in a drawer, no problem. So it's very easily portable, but it's also easy to store. It doesn't take up a lot of room for us as well. Next measure that we'll look at is bioelectrical impedance. Lots of different options for this. I showed you kind of probably the most common version of this. But you can also, there's also some different scales that have the bioelectrical impedance as well. So basically what you do with this one is you're going to hold on to these little sensors here with both your hands. You're going to type in a little bit of information. So it asks for like your age, your gender, your height, and your weight. So again, you want to have those accurately measured prior to doing this test. And basically what it does is it's going to send an electrical current through your body, and it's going to measure how fast that happens. Okay, so it doesn't hurt or anything else like that. You don't feel the current or anything. But again, when we talked about fat storage versus muscle and the amount of fluids that we store, we know that fat stores a lot of, or fat does not store a lot of water. Muscle stores a lot of water. So if I have a large amount of muscle mass, that current will flow very fast through my body and reach the other side. Okay. If I have a lot of fat mass, fat is going to impede the speed of that current. And so therefore it's going to take longer, and that will give me a higher body fat percentage. Okay. Again, this is the most simplistic of the bioelectrical impedance devices. This one's also probably $30, something like that. They also have a lot of scales that can do this as well. So maybe you've seen the scales where if you take off your socks, it'll give you body fat percentage. It's doing the same thing. So it's sending that electrical impedance or that electrical signal through your feet in order for it to kind of estimate what your body fat percentage is. The most accurate of the bioelectrical impedances involve both a handheld piece and something that you stand on with your feet. Okay, so it's really a foresight, device basically. And so you're getting multiple signals and getting more information. And again, if I have it on both my feet and my hands, then I'm getting more information about what's going on in my whole body versus if I just have the handheld device, I don't get as accurate of a view of like my lower extremities, for example. So for example, women are more likely to store more body fat on their lower extremities, so like hips and thighs, for example. So when I do this, the bioelectrical impedance with just the handheld device, I get a lower body fat percentage than what I might get if I use that foresight. Okay, so again, using, both of my feet are on the scale and my hands are on the scale. Because as a female, you're going to tend to carry more weight in your lower half. So again, I might be 1 or 2 percentage more if I use the foot placements as well. So again, that's kind of one other con to think about. The full body scans, like Tanita is one example of that. That's fairly expensive. There's an in-body scanner that Dr. Dan has over at Spine and Sport that I've used before as well. Those are both the Foresight devices, and those are fairly expensive. So again, you could spend $30 on it. You could spend a couple $1,000s on one of these in order to get you some information that way. The other nice thing about the Foresight ones, like the in-body scanner or Tanita, are two examples. Those are two different brands of the Foresight bioelectrical impedance. It'll tell you fat percentage in different segments of your body. So it can tell you like, okay, how much fat do you have in your left leg, in your right leg, in your right arm, in your left arm, that sort of thing, which is really cool to see the difference and to see imbalances in people as well is pretty neat to see. Particularly, if you were an athlete or are an athlete that throws. Okay, so, maybe you have one side that's more dominant than the other. What's the difference in body fat percentage on your left versus your right, or something like that? Or if you're an athlete that, is more one-legged dominant or something like that, like a long jumper, for example. Again, when I do long jump, I'm essentially jumping off of one foot. And I'm going to jump off that same foot every time I do my jumps. And so therefore, we should have more strength in that leg in comparison to your non-dominant leg. So again, how does that play a role when we think about body composition and the difference or the variance from, side to side? It's pretty interesting to think about that and to measure that. So two more methods here. We've got underwater weighing and DEXA scan. Both of these methods are going to be substantially more accurate in comparison to skin fold and bioelectrical impedance. However, this is very invasive and this is very expensive. Okay, so those are kind of the trade-offs that we see when looking at this. So let's take a look at how this works. So the underwater weighing, basically you've got like a little tub here or some sort of pool. Again, I've seen different attachments that you could put it like, right into San Jose pool, for example. Or it could be some sort of small, this looks kind of more like a bathtub basically. So what we're going to do with underwater weighing is he's getting ready right now, and they're going to dip him under the water. So he'll be fully submerged under the water. He has to hold his breath for 10 seconds under the water. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to weigh how much he is under the water in comparison to how much water he displaces. So it's basically looking at what's his body volume, like how much room does he take up in comparison to how much he weighs, right? So that's what the underwater weighing is. Again, cons with this, you got to get wet. This takes a large amount of space. Do I need to drain it, every so often if I've got different people in here? So several cons with using this. Again, people have to hold their breath for 10 seconds. So not great in that regard, but it is a very accurate method for us. Okay, let's take a look at DEXA scan. Again, very, very expensive. I haven't seen personally more than like one lab in the exercise physiology world that has a DEXA scan because they're so expensive. These are more commonly found at hospitals, and they're more commonly known for detection of body or of bone density. So again, it gives us information about how dense our bones are. And that's really what the major purpose is for the DEXA scan. And again, the one exercise physiology lab that I've seen a DEXA scan in, the gal that was in charge of the lab does research on bone density. So again, she wasn't really, you can use it for body fat percentage, but it's not commonly used for that. This is probably the most accurate of the measurements for body composition. But like I said, at the trade-off of being super expensive, look how much room it takes up. I have to have somebody who's a technician who knows how to run the equipment as well. So you could probably, a lot of hospitals, I don't think there's any around the Dubuque area, but like when I lived out in Boston, you could easily go to a hospital and get a DEXA scan done to figure out what your body fat percentage was. So again, those are available, but not used super regularly. Check it out, non-invasive. So I got to just kind of lay down. I still have my clothes on and things like that. I'm going to get information about my bone density, but I can also take a look at fat and fat segments. So again, you can see the different colors here. Blue is showing us bone mineral content. Purple is showing us lean muscle mass. And then that yellow portion is showing us fat mass. Again, you can see the yellow kind of mixed in here in the middle, and that shows us that visceral fat, or the fat that's probably surrounding her or his, I can't really tell, body organs as well. So again, you can see, this yellow out here, this fat mass, this subcutaneous mass, maybe is excess. Maybe they've got a little bit extra in that particular area. We'd be able to get percentages and things like that out of this data as well. Couple other things we can do. Easy thing we can do is actually measure the circumference of individuals. And again, I can do this on my waist, on my hips, on my chest, on my shoulders, arms, legs. So again, I can segment all of this out and get a good feel for how, what their circumference is. And that's super useful if you've got somebody that you're working with, again, say you're a personal trainer. This is something I would always do, is take their measurements so that maybe their weight's not really changing a whole lot, but we can show them that they're losing inches, right? So again, their waist is getting smaller, they're gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time, so their weight really isn't changing. However, their body composition is improving. So it's nice to see that we can track changes that way. Again, one thing I would emphasize when using these measurements is the accuracy of your practitioner. So the person taking those measurements, we have to know how to get the exact same spot every time and use different cues that way to make sure that we're as accurate as we can be. Because again, think about like trying to take a measurement on your thigh. It would be easy to get a different spot 8 weeks later, right? So again, figuring out how to be as accurate as possible with those will enhance the results of that particular type of measurement. Also, we can use this data, like there's an equation where I can measure like your neck circumference and your waist circumference, and we can estimate body fat percentage that way. And actually the Navy uses that method as one of their methods for entrance standards. So in order to be accepted into the Navy, you have to meet, those certain standards. And again, that's one of the measurements that they actually do for that. So kind of interesting. Next method I have is the bod pod. Again, maybe you've seen this, maybe you haven't. They are popping up much more frequently. UD has one in their sports performance lab or their exercise science lab. I'm not sure what it's called. And I have done some work with bod pod as well at my previous institution. But basically, this works very similarly to the underwater weighing. And you can see the gal is sitting inside here. She's got a swim cap and a swimsuit on, or maybe like a sports bra and like spandex shorts. So again, a little bit invasive in that way. Again, I've got to be, wearing something super tight in order to get an accurate measurement. And basically, it's super easy to run. You set them in this little spaceship thing, you shut the door, and the door seals. And then the computer software is looking at air displacement. So again, we're going to now compare how much do you weigh relative to how much air did you displace when you were put inside this little chamber, basically. You sit in the chamber for, I don't know, it's about 90 seconds. You have to be very still in order for it to be accurate. It can also, so that can be a little claustrophobic for some people. Fairly expensive method. Again, if you were a guy and you had, long hair or anything besides like a buzz cut, then we would want you to wear a swim cap, because we don't want that hair displacing the air, and so therefore that would affect your results. So again, for guys, they would wear, spandex shorts and some sort of swim cap as well when they get their measurements done. Again, very accurate, but very expensive. This is another expensive piece of equipment to have, but it is very accurate, and it's easy to use too. So again, you don't have to have any skill as the practitioner in order to use this method. Again, we kind of mentioned body mass index as simply the ratio of how much I weigh in comparison to how tall I am. Again, this tells us the exact equation for that. Normal BMI levels, again, you could look up a chart to just, Google it, and it'll give you like your height and feet in inches versus your weight in pounds. So again, you wouldn't necessarily have to do this equation if you didn't want. But normal BMI levels are like 18.5 to 25. So that's a normal range. Again, look it up, see where you fall, see where you fall within that spectrum. Again, if we were in class, we would do some activities where we actually measure body composition. within our class, but we can't really we could do body mass index now, but I can't do skin folds on you. I can't do circumference on you. I can't do the bioelectrical impedance without nailing that to all 27 of you separately. And again, I don't think we have time to get that done yet in this semester, but BMI is one that you could easily look up. So it might be interesting for you to kind of check that out and see where you fall within that spectrum. I might actually even have a chart of that in the next PowerPoint that we're doing. But again, it's super easy Google to look up. Okay, so again, normal 18.5 to 25. What are the value and limitations of using BMI? So again, the value, it's a nice screening tool. Okay, so we can use this to figure out if somebody is underweight or obese, both of which could be related to, some different health issues. But it can be a useful guide for body weight for the average individual. So again, this is accurate if I'm not an exerciser. So for the average person in the United States, BMI is a fairly accurate measurement for your overall body composition, your overall general health. Limitations, it doesn't actually give you any information about how much fat you have. It simply just looks at how much you weigh in comparison to how tall you are. So some people are going to be classified as overweight, even though they have a low body fat percentage. Again, most commonly we would see that with big muscular guys. So again, a big muscular guy might have a body composition of, 8 to 10%, something along those lines. But are going to be getting a higher BMI level. So they might be 26, 27, something like that. Short, stocky, muscular guys are going to have high BMIs in comparison to their true body composition. So if somebody is exercising regularly and they get a high BMI, it might be better to have them do some other form of body composition. Some people that have normal weight, some could be classified as normal weight that have excess fat. So again, we'd call these people skinny fat people. So again, I'm sedentary, but I'm like fairly skinny, for example. Maybe I have a large amount of body fat percentage. I don't have a lot of muscle mass, basically. You're not going to look fat necessarily, but I don't have a lot of muscle mass. I'm not very strong, and we know that fat weighs less than muscle. So again, it might classify me as normal, even though I have an excessive amount of fat. So what are some factors that are important to consider when, looking at body composition? So again, how much body fat percentage we should have varies depending on age, diet, sports participation, gender as well. So again, as we already mentioned, males will have generally lower body compositions in comparison to females. Body fat percentage tends to increase in most people after the age of 35. So again, we see about a 1% increase in body fat percentage every 5 years, I believe it is. So again, a gradual increase in body fat percentage is fairly normal in adults. Not that that's okay, we don't want that. Again, the reason for this is probably decrease in activity level and an increase in calorie consumption, just slightly, just ever so slightly. And then total body mass is going to decrease between the ages of 50 to 60 years old, despite an increase in fat content. So again, if we're not careful and we're not diligent about doing strength training and doing something to maintain the muscle that we have, it's very easy to lose that in those later years. We're going to start to see muscle mass kind of decrease at those points. Again, we've mentioned this before, but I wanted to kind of look at the hormones associated with this because I think it's super interesting. So again, we know that women have more fat in comparison to women have more fat in comparison to men, and we know that that's related to the reproductive processes. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting, I think, is this hormone estrogen. So female hormones, there's two of them. We have estrogen and progesterone, and estrogen is going to be important for us in relation to fat storage. So the more estrogen I have, the more fat I'm going to store in my hips and thigh region. Um, and again, that can vary substantially from female to female, right? So what's a normal level of estrogen is really, really variant from female to female. So it's interesting to look at this. If I naturally have higher estrogen levels, I will have a greater tendency to have more fat stored in my hip and thigh region. Again, how much estrogen that I produce is probably significantly related to genetics. So if my mom stores a lot of fat in her hip and thigh region, I'm also at risk to store an excessive amount of fat in those particular areas as well. The male reproductive hormone is testosterone, and the more testosterone males have, the greater their likelihood is to have more muscle mass. It's easier to see muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth if I have a large amount of testosterone. Okay. So again, those are kind of the differences when we look at hormones as it relates to body composition in males and females. Again, I mentioned genetics just briefly when we talked about estrogen. What percentage of fat storage is related to genetics? This is an interesting number for you, I think, to write down. Somewhere between 25 to 60% of fat storage is related to genetics. So 25 to 60%. Again, that's a huge range. Why would we have such a huge range of, contribution when we think about what is genetics giving us? What are we actually, truly getting from our parents? Well, it's difficult for us to separate out genetics in comparison to what you learn from your parents, right? So not only am I getting those genes from my parents, but I'm also learning habits from them as well. So it's hard for us to differentiate between what is nature and what is nurture, right? What am I getting genetically versus what am I learning from the activities or from the behavior that is modeled from our parents or whoever, family members around us. Genetics can also play an important role in determining weight gain or weight loss in response to dietary intake changes. Okay. So again, certain people are going to have an easier time losing weight or gaining weight in comparison to others as it relates to their genetic predispositions. Now, one thing I want to note with this is not a crutch. This does not mean like, oh, my parents are overweight, so I'm going to be overweight and that's the end of the road for me. Or, oh, I don't have good genetics, so I'm never going to be able to lose weight, right? Again, we're still in control of a significant portion of, our weight. It's just what am I predisposed towards, and how hard am I going to have to work to achieve this goal? So don't ever think that this is like out of reach. Oh, my genetics have set me up for failure. No, it's not that. Again, we can certainly overcome some of these maybe downfalls that you believe you might have with some behavioral changes that we'll talk about in extensive detail next week. So what is normal body fat percentage for, males and females? Again, this is according to ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine. And I give you these based on the age range that you're currently in. So I believe this is for like 20 to 29-year-olds. Again, it may be a little bit less for those of you that are 18 or 19. But again, this will give you a really good idea of where we would want to be. So female athletes, we want to be less than 17%. Lean females, 17 to 22%. Average or normal is 22 to 25%. above average, 25 to 29, over fat, 29 to 35, and then obese is over 35% for body fat percentage. Okay. Let's take a look at the males. So males for an athlete, less than 10%, lean, 10 to 15, normal, 15 to 18, above average, 18 to 20, over fat, 20 to 25, and obese is 25 plus. So again, numbers that I want you to really make sure you know: normal, 22 to 25, 15 to 18, and obese, 35 plus, 25 plus. Okay, but I would fill in this chart and have this ready for your next exam as well. So just thought this was interesting, just kind of comparing and contrasting. If I am an athlete, or if I'm working with an athlete, well, what's average for those particular types of athletes? We can't just say, you know, all athletes fit into this category. You know, looking at certain athletes that are going to require more locomotion. So again, movement, where you know, being small is an advantage for them because it's more efficient, are going to have a lower body fat percentage in comparison to, for example, like a shot putter. Again, they don't care necessarily about locomotion. They just want to move an object as far as they possibly can. So they're more concerned with having more mass to put behind the shot put so that I can move it farther, basically. Okay. Again, look at your linemen are, you know, significantly higher than what you would see for example, like a basketball player who is going to be, you know, trying to run as fast as they can, but I don't have to tackle anyone, right? So again, it's interesting to look at this. I'm not going to test you on any of this. I just thought it was kind of interesting to include in here. So what is optimal? What is the optimal level of body weight or body composition for an individual? Well, this is a pretty complex question, right? So again, you know, you think about physical appearance and that individual's perception of what they look like, and things like that. And, you know, it seems like body image is really a big issue, you know, again, especially with social media. I think that that makes it even more challenging for people. But you know, your individual perception of what you look like is important, I think, in determining, you know, what is your optimal weight, where are you going to be happiest, right? But also, you know, thinking about health issues that might be associated with that, being too small, for example. Certainly some issues there we could talk about as it relates to eating disorders and things like that. Sports performance, again, what's the optimal weight for your sport can vary, like we said, depending on what sport you're in. There may be benefits for weight loss or weight gain for that particular sport. And then it's understanding the methods that we need in order to healthfully do that, and be able to manipulate our body size, body weight, body composition, right? So again, we'll talk about both weight loss and weight gain, and then you'll be able to then apply that if you are an athlete and we're interested in those changes. Also health as well. So some guidelines are important for health improvement. So again, I think at the end of the day, our first priority before we worry about sport is health, right? So again, we want to be healthy first, and then if we're healthy, then we're able to focus on improving our athletic performance second, right? We've got to worry about kind of those fundamental basics to start with. So some guidelines for health improvement, again, taking a look at that body fat percentage is probably the most accurate, but we could also look at BMI and waist circumference as well as good indicators of our overall health, and then how I can work on improving those. Again, you know, I mentioned this whole idea of body image. So what's the ideal body weight? Again, we talked about health, appearance, physical performance. What percentage of people are dissatisfied with their current body weight? It seems to be about 40% of American men and 55% of American women. Many of those people include high school and elementary students. They have a desire to change their body weight. So 85% of first year male and female college students were interested in changing something about their physical appearance. Again, females are generally more interested in being lean. Okay, so probably weight loss or fat loss, while males are usually more concerned with being more muscular. So they want to gain muscle mass. What about weight control for health? So again, we think about this idea of mental health and, what role does body image play as it relates to, our overall mental health? That's a very important component. You think about this concept of like look good, feel good, that type of thing. So again, that's really important, I think, for our general mental health as well. But then also physical health. We think about weight control in either end of the spectrum. So obesity can cause some major health issues, but anorexia can also cause some major health issues as well. So being underweight and not eating. So again, thinking about either end of that spectrum as it relates to that individual's overall health, we got to get them healthy first before we can even think about, approaching sports performance. But I will tell you, I've worked with a lot of athletes, definitely in this category as being a female endurance athlete myself and a coach as well. Lots of women struggle with this. I've seen a lot of that in sport as well. So sometimes, we think about getting them back to, a healthy status first before they're ready to worry about their sport. But I think a lot of times I use sport as like a carrot for them, right? Like, this is your motivation. If you want to do well in your sport, we have to get you healthy or you're not going to be able to compete, right? So again, I think that sometimes I use that as an outlet to kind of show women, in particular, why health has to come first. Because if you don't have the health piece, you're going to get injured before you're even ready to compete. So, I think that's important to think about. Weight control performance. So, again, weight control sports, such as wrestling and rowing and that type of thing. Thinking about health and how that affects those athletes from a psychological standpoint as well. Also sports like running where, I want to move as efficiently as I possibly can, and by weighing less, I improve my efficiency. So again, understanding that relationship is not hard for our athletes to see. And so, helping them to understand that, yes, that's great, but I also have to have energy in order to complete the activity. And I also have to have muscle mass in order to overcome things like wind or hills or, have the strength in order to move efficiently. So again, thinking about those things as well. Muscle mass sports, again, lots of football players are interested in gaining weight. And I know there's a huge stigma at Loris, but just in general in college football that, oh, I need to gain X amount of pounds or whatever. So thinking about muscle sports. So again, the benefit of that is, okay, well, if I can hit somebody and I weigh 250 versus 200 pounds, right? I'm able to knock more people down because of the rules of physics. If I weigh more, then I have greater force coming at them in comparison to the same version of me that weighs less. And again, we'll talk about weight gain and how we can make sure that that's quality weight. It doesn't do us much good to just be, eating McDonald's and, okay, well, I gained 20 pounds. Okay, well, that 20 pounds that you gained isn't healthy 20 pounds, right? That's not the best way that I could gain that weight. Can I gain 20 pounds of muscle versus 20 pounds of fat in order to improve my performance? Yeah, that's going to be substantially better than 20 pounds of McDonald's or whatever. So again, thinking about weight control, we'll talk a lot more about that in these upcoming units. You know, again, we think about this concept of obesity and weighing too much, essentially, is the simple way to put that. Simple answer, what's the cause of this? Again, we think about this energy balance. Okay, so how much am I taking in comparison to how much I'm burning? So the simple answer is I need to be able to burn more calories than what I'm taking in order to lose weight. Okay, so individuals that are experiencing obesity have taken in too much and haven't done enough activity. Okay, the more difficult answer for the cause of obesity, it's much more complex than that. So we need to understand both genetic and environmental factors that are contributing to this imbalance of calorie intake versus calorie expenditure. So again, you know, both the interaction of genetics and the environmental factors are important to consider in this particular scenario. So again, shared family genes, important determinant, but not sufficient enough to explain the increase in weight that we see gradually each year. So the average American gains between 1.1 and 2.2 pounds every single year. Okay. So that's a shit ton, right? Every single year of adulthood, the average person is gaining 1 to 2 pounds, basically. Okay. So, okay, maybe genes were important in determining what your weight was, but there should be a level at which you just kind of stay at that particular weight. Why are we continuing to gain weight throughout our entire adult lives? Okay. Environmental factors. So, shared environmental factors. So, what are you doing exercise wise? What are you doing to eat well? So these things we learn from our families. So again, I want you to think about your exercise habits. Did you begin exercising because that's something you did as a family? Or did you not exercise because that's not something that your parents modeled? So again, thinking about what did you learn at an early age? Maybe you were involved in sports and your parent drove you to XYZ sport or whatever, but they never did, you know, much activity themselves. It was about you. But maybe they would go out and, you know, play basketball with you in the driveway or whatever, right? So again, thinking about those exercise habits and what is being modeled from our families or from our parents at an early age is very important. Eating behaviors as well. So again, I want you to think about, and this is easy to do now that you're back at home. You know, what did you learn from your parents, right? What things did you grow up doing, and maybe you continued to do in college or not, and now you're back home and you're back to doing XYZ thing, right? Let me give you an example. My mom is a baker. Okay. So again, there is no way that you can have a meal without a dessert that accompanies that. Not only are you going to have a dessert with it, but you're going to have multiple choices of a dessert as well. So there's cupcakes, there's brownies, there's, you know, whatever else available at all times. Okay. So I grew up that you needed to have a dessert or you were going, you know, a dessert was available for lunch and dinner, right? So that was an eating behavior that I grew up with. Then when I got to college, I noticed that, oh, not everybody really eats dessert after lunch, for example, right? So do we need to have sweets twice a day? Maybe not. And again, as I started to learn more in my classes as a strength and conditioning major, thought maybe I don't need to eat so many sweets, right? So again, that was an eating behavior that I kind of eliminated as I became an adult. But again, that was a behavior that I learned from my family, right? So again, these environmental factors, I think we have to think about them as being more important than genes, because genes we can't control. So focus on what we can control, and that's what we're doing about it. What are the behaviors associated with you know, our weight and that sort of thing. So creeping obesity is interesting. So creeping obesity is caused by an increase in calorie intake and a decrease in physical activity. 100 calories extra per day is 10 pounds per year. 200 calories extra per day, 20 pounds per year. So that's a freaking insane. So again, imagine if I'm gaining 1 pound per year, I'm taking about 10 calories extra each day, right? That's not a whole lot to think about, right? That's nothing. If and to gain 2 pounds, okay, well I took in 20 extra calories per day. So again, this idea of creeping obesity, a little bit increase each day will add up in the long run, right? So what could I do to burn those calories each day? That's easy. I could easily take a little, 15-minute walk and I'm going to burn off 100 calories, or a 20-minute walk or whatever. So again, just being more physically active could help us to get rid of these things or make some healthy substitutes, right? Instead of having Pepsi, maybe do Diet Pepsi or whatever. Instead of having 3 pieces of pizza, maybe you only have 2. So again, just small changes will be effective at allowing us to maintain our weight, as adults. Again, we've kind of talked about these as well. So overweight is somebody with a BMI that's over 25, so 25 to 29 is considered overweight, and then obese is greater than 30 for the BMI. Also gave you those body fat percentage standards. This is the second time you've seen these, so greater than 35% for females and 25% for males. So again, obesity is having excessive amounts of body fat. So how do I change body weight? And again, this will be a topic that we're going to continue to talk about, but positive energy balance versus negative energy balance. So this kind of seems like backwards to me, I think, just because you think of positive as good and negative as bad, but that's not necessarily true in this scenario. So positive energy balance, think about this like your bank account. I'm putting more into savings than what I'm spending. That's good for your bank. Do that with your bank account, with your financials. But when it comes to calories, that's not good. That means I'm taking in more than I'm expending, right? I'm not expending an equivalent amount of the calories. So therefore, I'm storing more calories, and so therefore I'm gaining weight. So positive energy balance involves excess calorie intake, not enough calorie burn, and so therefore weight gain will result. Negative energy balance is the opposite. So again, we think about this as it relates to your bank account. Say I put $100 in, but I spent 120, right? Now I have a negative balance in that bank account, okay? That is good if I'm interested in weight loss, right? So I took in 100 calories, but I burned 120, so therefore I had a negative energy balance. So I was burning more than I was intaking. So that's a good thing if we're interested in weight loss in the long run. So negative energy balance will result in weight loss, and negative energy balance is related to more calorie expenditure in comparison to calorie intake. So when establishing this energy imbalance, again, the first kind of application we'll have to this will be looking at weight loss as it relates to, obesity is a big component of that. So this figure is I think a good figure for us. 2006, but yet that's when the figure came out, but then got this information in 2014. So probably ready to get a new update on this. However, our ACSM conference is canceled this year, so I don't know if I'll be getting an update anytime soon on that, but we'll stick with the 2014 guidelines for now. Right. So when we think about obesity, again, we had this positive chronic energy balance. So I was taking in more calories than I was expending. Okay. So again, what's the cause of that? Let's take a look at reasons why I'm taking in too many calories. Okay. Again, so those factors are listed here on the left. So portion size. So again, I'm eating a bigger portion. We think about portion sizes as it relates to food from a restaurant. I'm getting more than I was 30 years ago, for sure, in each meal. Okay, so we're providing larger portions, and that's becoming more standard for individuals in our country. Okay, so that's one thing. We're also consuming high energy density foods. Okay, so foods like candy, for example, peanut butter, those types of foods are very dense in calories. Cashews, although cashews are good, candy's not good. Um, you're getting a lot of calories in a small portion of food as it relates to volume, right? So sweets, for example, or like fried cheese curds. Okay, those are all super high in calories, but you don't get a huge volume of those foods. Okay. High glycemic index foods, so simple sugars that are quick to be absorbed and are very easy for us to break down, such as again, your sweets, so candy and cookies and white bread, um, you know, uh, pasta, so not whole wheat pasta, but your regular pasta. So that's all got a high glycemic index. Soft drinks, again, consuming, pop or something like that. And maybe you're thinking, well, I don't really drink pop. Well, do you when you drink alcohol, though? Maybe you drink rum and cokes or something like that, right? Or, some sort of other fancy drink that is adding a bunch of sugar, which I guess is our next category. So, added sugars. How many fancy coffees are you getting per week, right? So, again, all the added sugar associated with that, or any added sugar that we're adding to any products that we're consuming. Easy food access, again, I would say, that certainly contributes. You see commercials on TV about the Baconator or whatever, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go try that, right? So easy to access food. Fast food has made food very accessible and very convenient. Low cost. So again, I can get cheap shitty food really easily. So again, it's accessible and it's not super expensive. So that's great. A variety too. Man, I can go all sorts of different places to get fast food that's convenient, and there's a wide variety, right? I can go get fried chicken. I can go get a hamburger. I can go get pizza at Casey's, for example. I could go get ice cream at Culver's. So again, I can get a variety of things super easily, right? Convenience. So again, it's super convenient to eat unhealthy. It's easy to keep some of those unhealthy things available for you. Okay, they taste freaking good, right? Who doesn't want Culver's ice cream? It's delicious, right? So food tastes good, and so that makes it challenging not only for us to limit the amount of times we go, but also the quantity of what we're consuming, right? Am I going to get the small or am I going to get the large when we go to Culver's? So think about those things. And then ads and marketing, again, I kind of already mentioned that. You see a commercial for the Baconator, for example. Okay, well, now that's something that I'm going to keep my eyes on. And again, I think that documentary that we watched, the Fed Up documentary, had some things in there about how we're marketing towards kids and showing them these unhealthy options, and then that's what the kid wants. So again, ads and marketing are pretty crazy when we think about that. So again, all of those are contributing to an increase in calorie intake. Let's take a look at what's contributing to a slowdown or a decrease in our energy expenditure. Okay. Sedentary workplaces. So again, you think about like 1940s, 1950s, we did a lot of manual labor, right? So guys worked in a factory or on a farm or did something physical. So they were burning a lot of calories from that physical labor, right? Now more people are working at desk jobs or someplace where they're just sitting, okay? Again, since we've been online, I feel like I just sit all day. I didn't realize how active I really was when we were at school. But, even just simple things like walking from my office downstairs to go to the bathroom was significantly more when at Loris versus at home. Okay, the bathroom is 5 steps away from me right now. So again, sedentary workplace, people are just sitting all day. If I don't make a conscious effort to do something and move around in my house, like, every couple hours. And again, I'm sure it's the same with you guys as well, because you're sitting at home doing your homework and things like that. If I don't make a conscious effort, I'll look at my watch and see I only had 2,000 steps for the day, which is insane. My normal day at Loris with, by the time I taught my classes and walked from building to building for meetings and whatever else, and went to track practice, I would easily have 10,000 steps in every day without even exercising. So again, sedentary workplace is huge. Sedentary schools as well. We have you guys sit, and that's all you do is sit, sit, sit. And again, that's what you were doing when you were kids as well. This whole thing, it drives me crazy, like, oh, diagnosing kids with ADD and ADHD when they're like 5 and 6 years old. Well, they shouldn't be sitting, right? They should be outside playing. They should be being able to be more active and getting some of that energy burned off, right? Kids aren't meant to sit for 8 hours in a row and listen, right? That's too difficult for them. And again, nobody should be doing that. So sedentary schools are contributing to childhood obesity, absolutely. Activity unfriendly community design. So again, maybe you live in a place where it's unsafe to exercise outside. If we had more bike trails or bike paths, would you bike more places? If there were running trails closer or hiking trails closer, would you utilize those things? So again, creating a more active environment for the community can contribute to an improvement of energy expenditure. Cars, again, you think back however many years, less people had cars, so maybe you walked more places, or you rode your bike, something like that. So it's convenient to drive every place. And again, some of you that live very close to campus will still drive over. You live 400 meters or half a mile away. Could you walk? Yeah, you could walk, right? You have to be a little more organized and leave sooner in order to get to class on time. But you could walk more places, on campus and that sort of thing versus driving everywhere. Drive-through conveniences. So again, thinking about like the online grocery shopping. So now I sat on my couch and I selected the things that I wanted into my grocery cart, and then I drove over there. I didn't even get out of my car, and somebody loaded those for me, right? How much less energy have I expended doing that versus I drove to the store, I parked, I walked in, I walked up and down every single aisle, I picked up my groceries myself and transported those into my car. Again, little things like that. We have eliminated with some of the conveniences of drive through and that sort of thing as well. Online things, delivery service as well. So not only drive through conveniences, but now we've got a lot more, especially with the times right now, delivery services available for food and things like that. Elevators, escalators, again, you go to a airport, for example, there's nobody on the stairs. Everybody's on the escalators, right? So again, what can we do to get people more active to use the escalator? You have all this time. You've got 3 hours on this layover, and you're going on the escalator, right? Where you could be taking the stairs and burning a little more calories that way, right? Remote controls. I don't have to get up. I don't have to do anything. It's all on my phone, or it's all, you know, um, it's all on this device. Okay. Sedentary entertainment. Again, I sit and watch TV. That's our form of entertainment, versus doing something that's a little more active. Maybe I could be outside playing XYZ sport, or even just something like playing bags outside, or cornhole, maybe is what you call it. That's maybe better entertainment than just sitting on the couch and watching TV, right? Again, we have to have good weather in order to do some of those activities that I commonly think of. But, think about what you do for fun, what's your entertainment. And then labor saving devices. So again, with technology, we see really decrease in energy expenditure from things that we can simply do from our phones now. Okay. So again, that's it for our lecture on body composition. Let's see, stop share. And like I said, the next units that we'll be talking about will include weight management as it relates to weight loss and also weight gaining. Right? So have a great day and let me know, as always, if you have any questions.